everyone. Welcome to the Safehouse, brought to you by the Safehouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the Safehouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. If you are a defense industrial base contractor and or a Department of Defense partner, pay close attention to this episode. Jody Stoehr is going to shed light on the who, what, when, where, why of the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. And so Jody is the co-founder of SMPL-C and is our guest today. I'm delighted to have you. Jody, welcome to the Safehouse.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
We always like to get to know our guest a bit. So, kind of the journey you've taken from the time you were born till now, or you may want to shorten that down just a little and kind of acquaint yourself with the audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess just a little bit about me and my background. I was born in Maryland and raised in the Maryland area where my father worked at NSA, and we got the great privilege of traveling the globe with his role because he was part of the national security agency there, and we lived in Germany for about probably 4 years in my younger childhood, and then came back and lived back in Maryland, attended the University of North Carolina and in College Park as well. I went to both schools. I was an ACC Division I athlete, and
What sport? What sport, Jody?
I did track and soccer.
Nice. I did track Division III, so Division I. Tip of the hat to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was one of the. I won't say my age, but I was one of the first in Title IX, and it was pretty fun adventure for me. But
Nice.
but yeah, and with that, I graduated with a business degree, so I always wanted to be in business. Loved numbers, loved the art of the deal, and then through my journey, I jumped in with smaller companies because I loved startup environments. I loved innovative environments. So if you looked at my resume, it might look like I worked at a lot of big companies, but it was just that most of the companies I started with got acquired or grew through acquisition. And so entrepreneurialism is something that's in my blood, I feel. And so I was an owner in a business out of the Maryland area, which was a digital marketing agency, grew that company to about 40 million in revenue.
Nice.
And we sold the business. We had 5 offices across the country with about 250 employees, and sold that business in 2016. And, with that, I was working with a lot of startups, helping them grow. I'm definitely more on the growth side and the go-to-market side for businesses. And, with that, I also mentored a lot of companies, and I fell in with a company here where they were building a very cool product that essentially automates a lot of the documentation process of the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, as you referenced, the CMMC mandate. And they asked me to come on board and help with their go-to-market, and here I am.
So what is the CMMC, if you're to kind of break it down for a business owner that is doing and wants to do business with as a defense contractor or partner? What is it? What was the driving force of it? I think I understand it, but let's break it down just a bit so we can all, in layman's terms, understand it a bit better.
Yeah, sure. So CMMC has been really like an initiative, I guess you could say, since the previous Trump administration. I mean, that administration did push that into effect back around 2019. And it's been an initiative to essentially lock down the cyber walls in the defense industry base, because there's been just too many incidents where the DoD is passing on sensitive information to the defense industry base, and our adversaries are hacking into their walls and getting our secret information. So
okay.
This is really why this is in effect. It's been more of a self-attestation process early on, but Now it has become a mandate. So it's been a long road, but the mandate is now in effect. It was signed in on October 15th, so it's fairly
Hmm.
recent. So not a lot of contractors or the supportive vendors that are out there supporting contractors, because they're also a part of that, like MSPs and external service providers. They're all a part of this mandate because they're all the flow down of this sensitive information hits these other providers. So it's a very large ecosystem that needs to get locked down. I think, the numbers are 350,000 defense contractors. And then if you throw in the external service providers, just tack on another 100,000 just to be sort of conservative.
Wow.
But so it's quite a bit, the total addressable market for solving for this to execute and help
Mm.
these companies is very large.
So it's really kind of the third and fourth party risks that are associated with doing business with the government contracting, in particular defense contracting, to protect the integrity of our cyber infrastructure.
Yes, that's really the intent of CMMC.
Okay.
And it is in effect, and it will start to show up in many contractors, in their actual awards, their contract awards.
Yeah.
The clauses, the contract clauses will say you must be CMMC compliant, and it will have certain restrictions or time bounds, types of language in there, and that will be rolled out as of next year.
Wow. So if you're not certified, you are not playing, basically.
Pretty much, yep. If you're not compliant, you will stand the risk of losing your award or being passed up and
Oh.
maybe pushed aside for later. And there is a big initiative from the primes where they have already marched forward with this, but the primes, they will be overlooking their supply chain that are not compliant because they assume the risk for their supply chain. So it's a very serious thing that the DIB needs to start educating, and they need to be educated on this, and they need to start executing, because the process can take upwards of, anywhere from 6 to 18 months, depending on how much sensitive information and how large their organization is.
Okay. Yeah. Could you walk us through that process? What's involved in that process? And then after that, talk about ways in which to expedite that process, because I think you have some pretty good insights there.
Yeah. So just to kind of walk it back just a little bit, a lot of people think CMMC is a framework, right? And CMMC is not really a framework. It's a process. And a lot of people have asked me to build analogies, like what is it synonymous with? And I like to say it's synonymous with like the tax preparation industry, right? So if you think about it, there's the taxpayer, right? And the taxpayer needs to reach out and find someone who's an expert to help them with their taxes. So they would reach out to potentially like an accountant, for example. And then the accountant might be coordinating, their paperwork with someone like a bookkeeper, right? So the bookkeeper would be there to pull everything and sort of put everything together. And then you have software, right, that's out there that can help centralize and store all your documents, and maybe even make it easier for the next year when you have to pay your taxes the next year. And then lastly, there's the IRS, right? That's that party that looks to make sure that everything is accurate. So if I had to build out the same model with CMMC, it's very, very similar, meaning you have the defense contractor and they would reach out to an accountant-like person or an advisor potentially to help them walk through this, because those advisors are experts in compliance. Just like an accountant, I mean, it's very expensive. This is a very expensive person. So be prepared to spend a lot of money, with an advisor, but they're very core to this ecosystem, and there's ways that you can drive efficiencies with them. But then there's also, like with the bookkeeper analogy, that's what I would say are the remedial providers out there, the people that fix the things that might be broken, like MSPs, for example. those are people like the bookkeeper, and they are very important in the ecosystem. But to be compliant from a technology standpoint, especially on level 2 CMMC, and we'll get into that in a minute. There's
Mm-hmm.
3 different levels, but level 2 is the one that's a very complex and probably more on the majority, if you will, that a lot of people are focused on right now. But those MSPs, I mean, this could cost like anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 just to fix some of these things, or just to become compliant on the controls that are required for CMMC. And then lastly, there's in between there, I should say, there is software, right? There's software out there to help you organize, automate a lot of this documentation. And that's a very, very important part of scaling this process, because this process could take, from a documentation standpoint, upwards of about 500 hours. And that's internal and external services. So having a centralized system of record, I think, is very important, and automating some of the documentation, because a lot of this is all being done in spreadsheets, and that's not scalable for continuous compliance. So you need that. And that's very economical to find those types of platforms out there, and then there's third-party assessors, just like the IRS. And these assessors are called C3PAOs. The challenge with both the C3PAOs and the advisors, if you will, is that there's only like maybe 2,000 advisors in the ecosystem and about 300 C3PAOs in the ecosystem.
Oh, wow.
To service over 350,000 defense contractors, the supply and demand is a big problem.
Well, yeah. So it sounds pretty labor intensive, and some things could probably be automated. But roughly, you'd have to go see if you are compliant enough to do business, right? So you have to kind of find where you have gaps. Then you probably have to set up a schedule to fix it, I'm guessing. And then you have to create a report that says, hey, I fixed it and I am now compliant or certified. Is that sort of what happens?
Yeah, I mean, those are the big rocks. I mean, if we had to break it down into some of the chunks here, I mean, the first thing that they would need to do is understand their scoping of their sensitive data, like what assets are impacted by sensitive information. That's number one. And number two would be, as you mentioned, the gap assessment, where they would need to go through at the actual objective level. There's 320 objectives for level 2, and then there's 59 objectives for level 1. And we can maybe talk about that next, but the level 1, level 2s have, different objective levels, and they have to find their gaps within all of those objectives. It's very detailed. And then from there, they need to pull together like a project plan on how they're going to remediate. It's called the POAM. And then they would move into remedial activities. But this is where the documentation is kind of crazy, because after they remediate, they have to pull evidence, just like you would pull like your W-9s or your W-2s or, whatever you're in tax preparation. You have to pull evidence that you are compliant and that you're doing what you need to do, in terms of policies and procedures. Evidence collection, you have to verify the evidence against the regulation. And then you need to submit this into a SSP document, which is a system security plan, which is very, very important for that third-party assessor to review everything and give you the stamp of approval to move forward and do business with the government.
Now, you mentioned level 1, 2, and 3, and that level 2 seems to be the majority. So what does level 1 look like, and how does it differ from the 2 and the 3? Just curious.
Sure. Yeah. So level 1 is, I mean, the easiest, it's called FCI, is the type of information, federally controlled information. But think of it as just less sensitive. It's just less sensitive information. It is a compliance measurement. It's on a framework called the FAR 52.204-21, right? If we have to get technical, but that is where you want to be compliant to that standard. And CMMC is a process. And as I mentioned, there's frameworks. You could kind of consider that a framework. And then for level 2, it's being compliant towards the NIST 800-171 Rev 2.
Okay.
So it's just two different standards. So one is 59 objectives, and then the NIST is 320 objectives.
Yep.
And then with level 3, this is really like top secret type of information.
Okay.
And it's also for a lot of like the larger primes, if you will. And there's not many that, in terms of the numbers, and a lot of them have already kind of gone through it, if you will, that they were part of the joint surveillance initiatives through DIBCAC. And so I don't think, the audience, especially small businesses, are really going to have to think about that unless they're involved with a very highly confidential, top secret project.
Yeah.
But right now, according to the DoD numbers, the level 1s are actually like 65% of the DIB. And the level 2s are about 35%. So level 1s are a lot. It's just the level 2s are the ones that are popping up right now because of just how long it takes. Like they know they need to get this done, and they know it could take anywhere from 6 to 18 months, like I said, depending on how many gaps they have. So they need to get started now, because if that award hits next year, they stand to lose it.
Yeah, so it sounds like the government really wants to help people get through this because there is the demand supply shortage, especially with the mandate in place. They're working very carefully to try to help people along and comply the best they can and to protect our country at the same time.
Yep. They're trying to, balance it because they need it done.
Yeah.
It's a war. This is a war. Cyber resiliency. This is a war right now.
Yep.
And, China, Russia, North Korea, they're tapping on our critical infrastructure every day. Every day. They're tapping into our DIB, every day. So this is a war. So it's not a like, we got to do this because, it's just another box. This is protecting our warfighters, protecting our nation. They will be auditing, even through self-attestation next year, but they understand that 200 people in the world can't certify the amount of people that need to have it up and running, having CMMC up and running in their company. So they're giving a little leniency and saying you can self-attest, but you should be approaching it just like you are getting a third-party assessment.
Well, Jody, before I met you, I had no idea this whole thing existed. And I'm sure if I'm a small business owner or a mid-sized business owner that listens to these podcasts, this is welcome information or shocking information potentially, because I assume people would know about this or maybe not know about this, or would it catch them off guard if you're in the business of trying to supply Department of Defense or the industrial base? Is this new information? Is information still getting out and notifications, or what? Is this a surprise?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little all over the place. I mean, it's definitely the wild, wild west. I think if I had to be I don't have stats on it, and I don't think anybody really does at this point, but if I were a betting gal, I would say that there is probably 60, 70% of the DIB that understands about it, because it's been going on since 2019. And I think a lot of folks were like just rolling their eyes about this because it was going on for so long. But now that the rule has hit, I think that news is starting to ripple and get out. And people, but what I think the DIB is lacking is education on like what to do. Like they just don't know what to do. They don't know. That's why I tried to draw this analogy so that you could understand, it's like when I do my taxes, because they're in the business of building rocket ships or drones. They're not in the business of compliance. So just like we're not in the business of doing our accounting work for our business. So we want to just outsource that.
I always ask if there's one thing that's actionable that our audience can do today. You kind of listed a few things there, but is there just, if they had one thing to do today or tomorrow morning, what would that one thing be, Jody?
I think the first thing they would want to do is understand who's going to run point in their organization. You need to have a point, even with self-attestation, it says it has to be an authoritative person within your organization that's going to take responsibility for saying, yes, we are compliant. Maybe that's your head of IT or you have a head of operations. That's what we've been seeing.
Okay. Yeah.
Primarily. And then even with some of the smaller businesses, I mean, it's the CEO himself, or herself.
Yeah.
So it is it's the wild, wild west with that. But I think you need to know you have to have a point internally. You can start shopping for this help, with these different resources, but be prepared. A little bit of sticker shock. I think the average cost, even published by the DoD, this could run anywhere from $75,000 to do this from end to end, all the way up to $250,000 or more, depending on how complex your organization and how big your organization is. But this is a very big services. If you hire an advisor, that could be like, $50,000. If you hire a C3PAO, those are like $50,000 to $60,000 for that assessment. And then to fix things with your MSP, it can range anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to $150,000. So this is not a cheap exercise. It is something that they have to know as they shop. And I think the first thing they should also try to start organizing themselves around as they collect information about their compliance posture is to have a centralized system of record that they're able to collect everything. Because the big cultural shift with CMMC, it's not a moment in time. It's not, hey, it's not like ISO and SOC and everything where you just say, yep, I'm compliant, and then you don't have to worry about it till next year. This is something that they could knock on the door at any moment, and you have to present that documentation within days. It's called proactive compliance. They want to see that you're maintaining it month over month or quarter over quarter at minimum. That's really what they're looking for. So just get your ducks in a row and know what's out there, and just start shopping, and hopefully you can kind of figure out a way to do it cost effectively, and I think innovation in the space is going to be popping up. So you'll find cost effectiveness with innovation versus throwing people at the problem.
Yeah. And need drives innovation. So well, boy, Jody, it's you opened my eyes, and I think a lot of other people's eyes, to this very important subject and a call to action. So I want to thank you for being such a wonderful guest today.
No, well, thank you, Jeff. This was my pleasure, and I appreciate you getting the message out there to the DIB. It's a very important journey that they're about to embark on, and it's protecting our country, and we appreciate them.
Yeah, well, you're going to help a lot of people with this podcast, and you're welcome back to join us anytime and scare us on other subjects.
We certainly don't want to scare people, but I just
Oh, I'm sorry. A sober reminder. Yes. How's that?
That sounds better.
Okay. Well, you take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the Safehouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the Safehouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen, or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org, or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.